I'm doing your great work and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop so I can come down to you? That is a great work from 2,000 years ago in Jerusalem, as discussed in the Bible and the book of Nehemiah. Let's discuss how this continues to affect the region and the U.S. and national security today here on the Great Work Podcast.
All right, welcome back. Great Work Podcast, daily news, daily updates. Today is Monday, July 29th, 2024. Big weekend in foreign policy. We are finally starting to see some accurate polls come out, so let's just get into this. For my audience and for me, the most notable thing that happened over the weekend is Hezbollah struck a city in the northern Golan Heights, Majd al-Shams, a Druze village, and it was the first mass casualty event caused by Hezbollah since October 8th, since they began firing at Israel. And this is the largest mass casualty event since October 7th. So a lot to get into with this. And I don't think you guys are going to like my analysis here, but I feel compelled to give it to you anyways. So first of all, although Hezbollah's media channels immediately did take credit for this strike, they then backtracked, which is not typical of them. That being said, their backtrack doesn't make sense, right? A missile was fired from southern Lebanon at this city. They've fired at this city or at this village something like 30 times since October 8th. The fallen missile recovered at the scene is a Falak 1 missile. That is an Iranian missile. Hezbollah is Iran's favored proxy. No other group in the region uses Falak 1s. Hezbollah is claiming that it's a failed Iron Dome missile. That's preposterous. So if you look at the crater on the field here, the crater, it's that of a payload of something like 100 pounds. A Tamir 1 missile, which is what Israel uses to intercept, it's not meant to hit the ground and make a big boom because it's not supposed to hurt anyone or anything. It's not a counter-assailant system. It's meant to intercept rockets in the air. When Iron Dome receptor missiles fall, they'll usually injure someone, one person. In this case, we have 12 dead and up to 20 injured. I've not seen further clarification on the number of people injured and critically injured, but just by all accounts, this was clearly Hezbollah, and right now all intelligence is trying to figure out, did they try to hit the soccer field or not? Not did Hezbollah do it, but did they try? Which, quite frankly, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they tried, because since October 8th, they've fired at impunity at Israel over 7,000 times. One of those times was bound to hit a target, hit something, and kill a bunch of people. You don't fire 7,000. I mean, it's a miracle that they didn't do it sooner, honestly. So It fired and it hit. That's all that matters here. It doesn't matter if they tried. And now people in Israel are saying that this changes everything. Virtually every Israeli military commander that I've seen in the immediate aftermath said that this changes everything. This is kind of the go ahead that there's going to be a war in the north. But then we've seen backtracking over the last few days. I mean, that was immediately after on Saturday afternoon. Well, now it's Monday morning. It is very clear that this has not changed anything for the greater global community. And at a certain point, is it bad? Obviously, it's terrible that these Druze kids just were killed by Hezbollah. And another thing I'm seeing people make a big distinction on is whether or not they're really Israeli or they should be seen as Israeli. They've been offered Israeli citizenship. The Golan isn't really Israel. The whole thing. Here's the thing. It doesn't matter if who considers that Israeli territory or doesn't. Israel considers it their territory. It's under the protective shield of the Iron Dome. It doesn't matter if these people see themselves as Israeli or not Israeli. Israel considers them Israeli. Even if they're not citizens, they have permanent it doesn't matter if they're not permanent citizens. They have permanent residency. They've lived there, and Israel now controls that territory. I saw a headline that a Lebanese foreign minister offers his condolences to Bashar al-Assad, because Golan used to be held by Syria. Well, not since 1967. So all of this posturing that they do in the Middle East of like, oh, but it should be there. Well, it's under Israel's protective control. If Bashar al-Assad tried to go down to the Golan right now, how would that go over? He couldn't get in. It's not his territory. It isn't. It hasn't been in 60 years. Not since he's been in power has it belonged to Syria. Syria gave it up in the 6-day war, a war they launched that they couldn't win. They tried to fight for it again in 73. They lost. This is not the Golan. And then under Trump, the United States recognized Israel's sovereignty over the Golan. So all these headlines about Israeli controlled, Israeli occupied, it doesn't matter. We recognize their sovereignty. So I don't understand why we backtrack now. I actually do understand. It's because we project such weakness around the world that I guess our word doesn't really mean anything anymore when it comes to Israel. That's what's become clear to everybody. When we say that we back Israel, everybody kind of knows we're not actually saying something that we agree with. Sorry, that's just the reality here. I disagree with it. I think the world is much less safe when we don't back our allies, but I'm just telling you how it is. And then, has this changed any calculations? I mean, we have not seen a significant retaliation. So last night, Sunday, they were jamming GPS systems. They were firing Israel was firing at targets, basically targets they've already fired at before, okay, throughout this conflict multiple times. So nobody believes that that is the true retaliation, but we've already got people going around all over saying, oh, but Israel, it's going to be a retaliation, but it's a non-escalatory one, and we have assurances from both Israel and Hezbollah that both of their retaliations will not be non-escalatory. So at this point, why does it even matter? Why even strike back in the first place? How much damage are we going to do to Lebanon or to northern Israel? How much are we going to allow to go on if we're not going to get anywhere? I hate this part of geopolitics where it's well, but they both have to respond, but the response it's a non-escalatory, it doesn't really mean anything. Then don't do anything at all. Don't do anything at all. I mean, seriously. Amos Hochstein, I guess, told a Lebanese former foreign minister Israel's targets for its retaliation, saying this is what they're going to target. Amos Hochstein is the lead negotiator of UN Resolution 1701, which is what ended the 2006 war. And he's been negotiating with Hezbollah this whole time to try and prevent a wider conflict. And I think that it goes without saying, the way that it should be to prevent a wider conflict is Hezbollah should stop firing at Israel. That's how, you don't want a war, you don't want an escalation, don't fire at Israel. And to be fair, most of what they've fired at has been evacuated villages, but the Druze didn't evacuate the north. So, there's that. But I mean, it's just stupid to me that we're even having these conversations of oh, but we're going to retaliate. Here's the thing. In any other scenario, a mass casualty event, the first few strikes that Hezbollah did at Israel, that would have been grounds for a full-scale war. But what we have now is a track record of 10 months of Israel barely responding, going tit for tat. They've not been able to establish deterrence. And any response they give, they won't be able to establish deterrence. And why? Because it's not the strike that actually matters. It's what's going on behind the scenes. And what's going on behind the scenes is we've got people pandering and trying to appease Iran and Hezbollah saying, oh, please don't strike, please don't strike, please don't strike. And they keep striking. Now, their argument is going to be, well, it could have been a lot worse if we didn't restrain them behind the scenes. Fine. But it's already bad now. 12 kids are dead. They were playing soccer. What are we saying? I don't know. And so at this point, I think that we need to, as people who are pro-Israel, have sober heads on our shoulders and say, look, yes, this should change everything, but it didn't. Yes, this shouldn't matter, yes, this should matter. And yes, Israel has every right to respond. It had every right to respond to the last 10 big things that happened, but it has chosen not to. And now with the immediate aftermath of, oh, well, basically like Hezbollah is scrambling and they're going to leave all of their bases and they're going to clear all of their stockpile warehouses, and then Israel's going to go around and they're going to bomb a bunch of them and everyone's going to feel better, and it's not actually going to deter Hezbollah because, by the way, they've already detected drones from Lebanon into Israeli airspace already. The lead up to the big retaliation hasn't deterred Hezbollah. Nothing will. Nothing will. The global community has basically come out and said, you know what? We're fine with this terror group being in complete violation of the resolution that they signed, Resolution 1701, and firing with impunity at Israel. We're okay with that. That's where the global community is at right now. Until that shifts in the global community, nothing here is going to change. And so all of the people saying, oh, well, we need a war, we need this, we need that. I'm sorry to break it to you, but like that's just not how the global community sees it right now. They're not going to see it until something dramatic changes. And dramatic, by the way, does not mean people dying on the Israel side. It doesn't. And I disagree with that wholeheartedly, but it doesn't. What a war with Hezbollah at this stage will look like is leaks all the time. France is saying this, the US is saying this, the US is restraining, the US and France are restraining Israel, the US and France are restraining Israel. Oh my gosh, this person, like, that's what this, like, you know, stop, start, humanitarian pause, just like Gaza. That's what a war looks like right now. You shouldn't want that. If you want what's best for Israel, you shouldn't want that. All it's going to do is cause infrastructure damage and damage to Israel on the global scale, like their reputation. That's all that this will do. All a Lebanon war at this stage will do. Because, by the way, Hezbollah are like, when we talk about, like, it is different from Gaza in the sense that it's not as densely populated, but Hezbollah is like the kings and queens, like the OG human shield users. Israel's not going to be able to strike back at Hezbollah and have like zero civilian casualties. And it honestly doesn't even matter if there's zero civilian casualties or a low ratio. We've seen that it doesn't matter in Gaza. They're still calling that a genocide. The first actual retaliation of Israel is going to be called a genocide. That's just what is going to happen. You know, and nobody wants a broader regional war. Right now, unfortunately, what it seems like is either Israel needs to accept this as the status quo for another 6 months until we can see some sort of leadership change in the United States, and we'll get to that, or the U.S. must, I think what probably should happen is Israel and Hezbollah should come to the table. I believe a foreign minister said that they are looking at, Hezbollah agreed to go back into accordance with 1701 and go north of the Litani River. They should just do that and then wait until there's a vibe shift in Washington, we'll say. Well, until people are willing to actually hold Iran accountable. Because this wouldn't take much, okay? All it would take, really, if people wanted to get Hezbollah back in line or stop them altogether, all this would take, the U.S. coming out with a supplemental package which will like double Israel's reserves of like certain short and medium distance missiles, mid-range missiles, saying that we're going to start reinforcing sanctions again on Iranian oil, and a limited strategic bombing campaign of Hezbollah targets in, you know, western Beirut, like that port, South Lebanon, and Baalbek, and Syria. That's all this would take. This wouldn't, like, you could get Hezbollah back in line so freaking easily. But again, like, for some reason, this administration is not willing to hold Iran to account. And if Iran senses weakness, it's going to keep going for blood because they know that there will be no response. That should be unacceptable to you. It's unacceptable to me, but it's the reality of where we're at. There's nothing we can do to change that. Again, until we have somebody new in office and in charge. So why, like, I don't know. The main point I'm trying to make here is that, like, if we look at, like, what would a just war be? Again, Israel has every right to fight in this war. But if they're not going to be allowed to, like, actually achieve their purposes for the war, it's just going to do more more damage than good at this point, both to the infrastructure of Israel and potentially, or to Lebanon and potentially Israel if Hezbollah really decides to kick it off and start going. They risk a regional war. And on one hand, while people, like more hawkish people would say you already have a regional war because you already have Iran like doing this and that. Yes, that's true, but this isn't what a true regional war would look like. It's nowhere near that. So, unfortunately, Israel needs to sit with its hands tied, again, until a new administration takes over. Which brings me to, what does that even look like? What is Kamala Harris's foreign policy? We don't know. She did come out last week and say that she will never stay silent on dead children. She has yet to make a statement at the time of me recording this herself about the what happened. I believe there was like one statement put out by her office or something, but she hasn't addressed anyone. The White House is now starting to put out things like the VP has been briefed on this, the VP has been briefed on this. Who's making these calls? Again, if we're threatening a regional war, we're parking a carrier off the coast of Lebanon. I know I keep saying this, but who's being woken up at 2 a.m. to make that call about what we do? This would be very different than the Iranian counterstrike on Israel, where U.S. planes went and flew and intercepted all these drones and missiles and stuff. There's much shorter of a distance between Lebanon and Israel, obviously. So who is making this? Is a much more dangerous fight. We risk losing U.S. soldiers. Who is going to be awake in the middle of the night trying to figure out what's going on with that? Because obviously all the fighting is going to happen at night. I don't think anybody believes it's Biden. Is it Kamala? Is it Blinken? Is it Jake Sullivan? Who's making these calls? It's another thing I would like to know. We know what foreign policy on the flip side looks like under Trump, and that would bring in people who are not scared of threatening Iran. Iran typically does well when we threaten them. When we assassinated Qasem Soleimani, they backed down. How do they respond to sanctions waivers and appeasement? Well, regional war, which is what we're seeing. But then again, we can't really necessarily think that Trump's fully going to be elected because we have these polls coming out and these polls are weird. And I'm just going to run through. So we have the polls that came out over the weekend. We're going to start seeing like more accurate polling here. So for the general election polls, we have Atlas Intel with Trump up 2. Wall Street Journal, Trump +2, Harris X, Trump +2, SurveyMonkey, Trump +1. So when we look at all of these polls, it's looking good for Trump. I don't know. Kamala is doing 4 points worse than right now currently than her worst 2020 poll. And Biden is doing Trump is doing 7 points better than his best 2020 poll. And Biden and Harris barely beat Trump and Pence in 2020. And that's according to the Ipsos poll. But then, so if you think about that, right? Trump is in the lead. Trump is at 48, 49, 50% in some of these polls, which is a big deal because he was never really able to break 46, 47 points. And that broke after the convention and assassination attempt. But then also when Kamala's within 2, it's strange, right? But what's weird too, so Biden dropped out on July 21st. The polls taken from, July 19th to the 21st showed both Biden and Harris unfavorable and losing really badly, by 4 to 10 points. But then polls taken from the 21st to 23rd showed an instantaneous jump in favorable ratings in polls for Kamala Harris, and undecideds completely disappeared. I'm not saying that this election is not significantly closer than it was when it was Trump versus Biden, but these polls don't make sense. Another thing I saw, if we look at, again, that Ipsos poll, right now 95% of the Democrat Party is behind Kamala. Now, first of all, that's just weird. I think Obama maxed out at 92% of the party being behind him. That's their messiah. He got 92, but she's at 95. Something tells me that poll number is wrong. But then if she's 2 points behind and she's basically maxed out her support from her base, and she's down something like 8 points with independents in Pennsylvania and other, that was according to YouGov. I should double check on that. But I mean, really, if we're like looking at these polls, Kamala's 2 points behind and she's basically maxed out her support with her base. She's doing better with the base than Obama ever did. So that just tells me either these polls are off and wrong, or I don't know. Or to me, the polls must be off, I guess, is the point I want to make here. And maybe we need longer before we trust them. Or she's going to have significant ground to carry with independents. Because if you've got that amount of your base, I mean, again, like this is going to come down to turnout, right? Like everyone always says that, but it's true. But again, Trump plus 8 with independents or something like that, or Kamala down 8 with independents, how is she going to present herself as like good and moderate and like fair to all of them? Because again, like I don't think anybody really knows where she stands. And her rush to define herself has been weird. Again, like all we've seen from her is like pandering with these weird like Gen Z memes like Brat and Coconut Tree. That's all she seems to be doing. And then if you look at where she campaigned in Wisconsin, she campaigned in Indianapolis and Houston last week. Nobody believes that Democrats are going to win Indiana or Texas. We believe it's more competitive for them now, but like they're not going to win in either of those places. Before Biden dropped out, their only strategy was Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. They needed to win all 3. I don't see it. You know, I don't see it. I don't know. I saw Pat from Perspective Politics on TikTok say something like he believes if Kamala picks Josh Shapiro as her running mate, then that shows that Democrats believe that they actually could win. But he thinks everything that they're doing with the campaign right now basically points to the fact that like they don't believe that Kamala can win, and this is just kind of like stopping the bleeding down ballot. Which I don't believe either. I don't believe that this is just them stopping the bleeding. I think that they are going to try to win. I've just yet to see them try to win. You know? I guess them trying to win is to be the like hype candidate. You know, pull like a Hillary Clinton 2016. They've got fights ongoing. They've got celebrities turning out for Harris, but that didn't work with Hillary. Are they dumb enough to repeat their same errors and mistakes? They also have a hell of a voter turnout machine, and maybe they are just depending on that and trying not to pin Kamala down on policy or anything, because they're just going to work on like driving out low turnout in the states they believe it matters. I don't know. I really don't know. But just the polls I'm seeing, I don't see it. I really don't see a path for her at this stage. And also we have to remember that Trump is far more organized than he ever was in 2020. So there's that as well. I think that's kind of what I've got. I mean, we've had a couple more foreign policy blunders. I guess Russia's threatening to start producing more mid-range and long-range nuclear weapons, or I believe it was only mid-range. They say that they feel like they're in a Cold War again. Obviously, last week we had Russia and China combined flying bombers over Alaska. Great. Russia's doing military parades. I guess they're reestablishing their firm ties with Cuba and parking a couple military installations down off in Cuba. It's starting to feel like we're in the Cold... They keep bringing up the Cold War. They keep threatening about, oh, well, it's you guys' fault for NATO expansion. I wish the U.S. response to that was just, hey, stop scaring your neighbors that you're going to invade them, and there will be no need for them to feel like they want to join NATO. Because like the whole way they've done that with like NATO expansion and how certain elements of the right have picked up on that, I think is so stupid. NATO's not its own group with its own self-interest. NATO doesn't do, if anything, we do worse with NATO when we expand ourselves, right? Because we bring in more people that we have to protect, and we bring in more troops and everything. So it's not in our benefit to expand NATO. We expand NATO when we have people who are scared of a Russian invasion. And then Russia like gaslights the West by saying like, whoa, but if you didn't expand NATO, we wouldn't feel like, no. Sweden didn't join NATO because they want to, NATO's expansionist. Sweden joined NATO because Sweden is scared of a Russian invasion. Like, that's how these things go. So I wish we would start messaging around that better, but we haven't. We have the Venezuela election where, you know, the US threatened Maduro saying you better hold a free and fair election, and then Maduro's not leaving office, it seems. So it's just a show of American weakness all around the world. It's going to be a scary 6 months. And again, who's in charge? I don't know. Right now, if we look at the polls, it looks very unlikely that Kamala wins, but who knows? So I will keep you updated on all of that. But yes, if you take anything from this, please go listen to Don't Waste This podcast. That came out last Friday, was up late. We have another episode coming out Thursday. It's the true crime podcast I'm doing about like the craziest story I've ever heard, a case of fraud. Polls are weird. I'm not even saying that Kamala's gonna lose. I just like think that the polls are really weird. And then when it comes to Hezbollah, like, you know, when you're seeing all these calls from people that are in the right to say that Israel has the right to respond, yeah, that's absolutely true. But like, what is that response going to look like? And at this stage, is that a response that is going to benefit, like net? In my opinion, no. But I'll come back tomorrow with even more. I'll put the trailer again at the end of this episode for the Don't Waste This podcast. Please go check that out. And yeah, see you tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day.
An Excelsior Studios original production.
A Hamilton County woman is facing serious charges, accused of scamming several people out of rental homes.
April 26, 2023 was a normal day for most in the suburbs of Indianapolis, but it was shaping up to be a very bad day for 25-year-old Megan Stoner, who was notified of a warrant out for her arrest.
9 charges for corrupt business influence fraud, where the loss is between $750,000 and $50,000, and theft.
And unfortunately for Megan, she would not be navigating her newfound legal troubles in private, because a community of hundreds who had been quietly watching her for years was assembling on the internet to discuss their experiences with her, which ranged from bizarre to dangerous to outright criminal, arguably worse than what Megan had been charged with.
Basically what she did was emotionally manipulated and I'll say abused even me for about nearly these 10 years.
And like, she will suck you dry. Any inch you give her, she just takes them out. Like,
Google number after Google number. You block the one, she's not done yet. She's going to get that last word.
The second you let her in, she takes over. And I mean, I would wake up to 20, 30, 40 notifications. I mean, she was scrolling back through things from my high school.
He's a dangerous human being.
And the strangest thing of all is, as her case unfolded, she continued to interact with this online community, which she called her haters, which was made up of business owners she had scammed, politicos from throughout the country that she had solicited for donations, a network of evangelical pastors located outside of the United States, a local brigade of moms who had called out her antics in Facebook groups for years, and even a sex shaman ended up coming together to solve crimes that she had not yet been caught for, and were able to catch her after she ran from the police for a month and finally put her in jail. So, how did this self-described political consultant, mental health advocate, teacher, and sexual assault survivor get into this mess in the first place? And how much of her story that she had told of herself on social media for years was actually true? That's what we'll explore here every Thursday on Don't Waste This Fucking Podcast, the story of Megan Stoner.